Good morning. It's a beautiful day here in Lakewood where I'm zooming from. I'm Sheila Wybrow, a member of the Board of Trustees of Tahoma UU Congregation. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from Occupy Puyallup ancestral land. I pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We welcome all who are joining us with a longing for community, the hope for peace, and who are seeking justice. We are a diverse congregation which encourages each one who comes through our doors to find their own truth and belief. We invite all to join us in a search for meaning and community, guided by reason, respect for each other, and by love. In this virtual platform, we have an opportunity to welcome guests from outside our area. So welcome to all of you who are joining us from places far away. I think somebody is coming from Alaska today, and welcome to our old friends. I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Links to the video version of this service will be posted there this week as well as on our website. You can find all our program announcements this week in our e-news and listed on our church calendar. And so here are some of the highlights for this week. Following worship service today at 11:30, children are invited to Kids Chapel with Nancy Slocum, our Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth. Next Sunday, May 9th, the Free Thinking Mystics meet at 9 a.m. with Doug Taylor facilitating. Also next Sunday, Doug Taylor hosts Drop-In Chalice Circle at 12 noon. This month's theme is, what does it mean to be a people of story? You can find the small group materials for this month's theme in this week's e-news. If you don't already subscribe to the e-news, you can find a link posted to the e-news on our website under the News tab. Our worship service with Reverend Linda next Sunday will be It's Complicated, when we'll explore some of the central features of Buddhist practice and philosophy as taught by Pema Chodron as we consider our families. Note that this worship service description is a correction to what you may have read in e-news because, well, it's complicated. Join us next Sunday for this exploration. Many of you know that Reverend Linda is planning to take an overdue and well-deserved sabbatical this summer and into early fall this year. In preparation for her sabbatical, plan to join our sabbatical committee and Reverend Linda for a discussion about what the sabbatical offers Reverend Linda and what it offers our congregation during her sabbatical. During Reverend Linda's sabbatical, one of our congregational connections will include working again with Joe Rettenmeyer. Also during the summer months, we'll be joining online services with Saltwater UU Church in Des Moines and North Lake UU Church in Kirkland, with worship leadership participation from each congregation. To learn more, join one or both sessions at noon on either Sunday, May 9th or Sunday, May 23rd. Links to all our programs can be found in the weekly e-news or via the events on our church calendar. Thank you for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes all of this possible. The programs, our staff who create and facilitate the programs, and the connections we make through our congregation. Now, let us prepare to gather in worship.
Good morning, friends. We open with these words. The wires and the Wi-Fi light up, and you click the link and the waiting room opens and our chalice appears. Not our chalice this morning, but certainly a good chalice. Soon there are voices and faces, and typed hellos, greetings from others known and unknown. And here we are, missing the warmth of a handshake, missing eyes looking into our own. the comfort of a smile, the delight of a hug, that friendly nod that lets you know that you're welcome. Still, we have found our way into this kind of community for these days. We are blessed to be here to have this connection. And we gather bearing all of what this time brings: fear and anger, loss and hope, spaciousness, emptiness, and more than can be adequately named. Let there be room for all of it and for all of us, no matter what we are carrying this day. Welcome to you, beloved friends. Welcome to all you bring. It is good to be together.
Please grab your chalice and join us in the reading that can be found in the chat this morning as Nancy lights the chalice in her home. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come.
There we go. Good morning. How are you all this morning? It is good to be here with you. My name's Nancy Slocum, and I am the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth here at Tahoma Unitarian Universalist congregation. I'm at home today. It's a new thing for me. Usually I am in the sanctuary, but this is our time for all ages. This is the time when we invite kids to come up to the front of the sanctuary to hear a bit of a story. So here we are today. Good morning. So today in our service, we are talking about grief. And grief it's the sadness that you feel when you feel a very deep loss. It's more than just feeling sad. You know, like you might feel sad if you're planning on going bike riding and you look out the window and you see that it's pouring down rain and you know you're not going to get to go on the bike ride with your friends, and you feel sad about that. But grief is a sadness that happens when we lose something, or more importantly, someone who's very dear to us. Maybe someone moves away. Maybe someone dies. Maybe you've experienced such loss, maybe the loss of a grandparent or a pet. The sadness we feel with these losses can stay with us for a long, long time. That's what we call grief. And today's story is about grief, and it comes from the Buddhist tradition. Buddhism is a religion that started a very long time ago, about 2,500 years ago, in the area of the world that is now the countries of India and Nepal. You might look at a map with your parents and see where that is in the world. It was such a long time ago, we don't even know exactly when Buddhism started. But the spiritual leader of Buddhism is called the Buddha, and his name was Siddhartha Gautama. So our story is called The Parable of the Mustard Seed. And a parable is a story that helps us learn about the world. It gives us things to think about. So here is the parable of the mustard seed. There was a woman, and her name was Kisa, and she was very, very sad. She was grieving. She was feeling much grief because her beloved son had died. She couldn't even believe he was dead, and she kept asking everyone if they had medicine to make him well again. A friend suggested she visit the Buddha, as he was a very wise teacher, and she thought he might be able to help Kisa. She went to the Buddha and asked him if he could help bring her son back, and he said, "Yeah, I think I can help you. What you need to do is bring me a tablespoon of mustard seeds." Now, do you know what mustard seeds are? You may have some in your cupboards in your kitchen. They're these very tiny little seeds, and they're used to grow mustard plants, and they are also used in cooking. Sometimes people use them to spice up food, and they're used to make mustard. No surprise there, huh? And they're so tiny that to fill a whole spoonful of them, a tablespoonful, it would take a lot of mustard seeds. The important thing, though, the Buddha said when suggesting that she gather a tablespoonful of mustard seeds, is that each seed must come from a household that has never experienced death or grief. Well, Kisa was so excited that the Buddha had a way to help her. She scurried off and she began knocking on her neighbors' doors. At the first household, she asked if she could have a mustard seed. Well, of course, I'll share a mustard seed with you, is the reply. And at this point, I'm thinking Kisa was thinking, wow, this is going to be easy, right? My neighbors are all so generous. I'll be able to gather my mustard seeds in no time. But Kisa then explained that it needed to be from a home that had not experienced any grief. And the woman at the door looked at her sadly and said, oh, I'm sorry, but we have had grief here. My father passed away last year, and we still grieve the loss of him. He was such a good man, and we miss him deeply. Well, so Kisa said thank you and went off to the next house empty-handed. But when she got there, she noticed they were celebrating her birthday. And she was very encouraged because she thought, if they're celebrating, they must not be feeling any grief. She knocked on the door and told their story. And the response again was, well, I'd love to share a mustard seed with you, but we have felt grief in this household. My dear brother has died, and I miss him so much. Well, Kisa said she was a little confused by this because they were celebrating. And the man replied, yes, although they felt grief, they also had things to celebrate. And that life continues, even while feeling grief. Kisa continued throughout the village, and it was always the same. As people talked about the people they had lost, Kisa began to realize that the grief that she had been experiencing, the grief she felt from the loss of her son, it was her own, but it was something everyone else had felt. Grief touched everyone. But she also noticed that in people's grief, they continued to live their lives. They continued loving each other. They continued expressing sympathy to her about her loss. And she began to feel the support of her village, and it helped her feel a little bit better. Kisa returned to the Buddha and didn't have one mustard seed, but she told him about her experiences. She said she realized the Buddha would not be able to bring her son back, but she also knew that she would go on with the support of her friends and neighbors. This is the Buddhist parable of the mustard seed. It focuses on Kisa's grief at the loss of her child. But grief can come with all kinds of losses, not just when someone close to us dies. I told this story a year ago at church, and during that time, it was just when the pandemic was kind of starting up, and we were grappling with some of our losses. We've also maybe lost people or pets during this time. We may have had friends move away. And there have been many losses related to this pandemic that we're experiencing. We've been really missing getting together with friends and family. I know I miss all of you. I can't wait till we can be together again. And I feel deep sadness by not being able to be with you. There are things we love doing that we haven't been able to do because of the restrictions from the pandemic. I know I haven't gone to a movie theater for over a year. Maybe you've had activities canceled, sports, dance classes, swimming at the pool. What have you missed during this time? Things are opening up, but they still aren't fully open. And we may still be feeling this grief over these losses. And because this pandemic has gone on for so long, things that felt okay a year ago may now feel overwhelming, hard to handle because it's gone gone on for such a long time? Are there things you're grieving right now? Grief can affect us all in different ways. We might feel really sad, or we might feel bored, or we might even feel ourselves getting really angry about things. There are a lot of ways grief expresses itself. Remember that it's okay to feel it, and it's okay to reach out for help and support. Talk to a parent or a trusted adult or a good friend. In the same way that Kisa felt better when her neighbors offered support, talking with someone can really help. We can all feel grief, and we can all help each other get through it. That's our time for all ages this morning. I share with you the words we use to send the kids off out of the sanctuary. To all of you, we hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go. Thank you. Take good care.
Now is the time we offer our financial gifts to the work of this congregation. Thank you for your consideration to support our church during this unprecedented time apart. You may follow the link in the following slide, or click the link in the chat, or text your donation to contribute your support for our church members and staff working tirelessly to keep our congregation connected in new and dynamic ways. Every little bit helps. And while we are physically apart, our gifts are stronger together. We dedicate ourselves, our offerings, to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls. Talking to grief. Ah, grief. I should not treat you like a homeless dog who comes to the back door for a crust, for a meatless bone. I should trust you. I should coax you into the house and give you your own corner, a worn mat to lie on, your own water dish. You think I don't know you've been living under my porch. You long for your real place to be readied before winter comes. You need your name, your collar, and tag. You need the right to warn off intruders, to consider my house your own, and me your person, and yourself my own dog. Denise Lebertoff.
Nancy mentioned that she told the story of the mustard seed a year ago, and indeed this whole service has been taken from one nearly a year ago. It's actually in June. And we're doing it again, partly because I got my second shot this week, and I wasn't absolutely certain how I was going to feel and whether I was going to have enough creative energy to actually put together a full-on service myself. And also because grief is something that comes to us all the time, over and over again. And even as we start to see the end of our isolation, there are still griefs coming and going. So I invite you to join in this reflection on grief today. Last year, for the first time, I got to take part in the Festival of Homiletics. It's kind of like a Comic-Con for preachers. Usually it's 5 days. With preaching and lots of workshops on how to do that better. It's a time for community and connection for those of us who speak from pulpits. Because of the virus, it was virtual and inexpensive. So I got to go last year. I'm going again this year. I'm really excited about it. I signed up and I went to learn and be fed by some of the best preachers there are. One of those sermons really struck home and struck hard. The Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III is the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, a church that gained attention some years ago when it was the home to Reverend Jeremiah Wright and was the congregation that the Obamas were married in and where they had started raising their girls. Dr. Moss, standing in his empty sanctuary, spoke about grief, a topic that was more timely then and now than I had expected. And I had an awareness of how much grief was, how much loss was going on. It was impossible to miss, still is. Routines that were totally disrupted, contact with our beloveds moved into small boxes on a screen. Some of those simple pleasures that we enjoyed, a meal with friends, coffee hour at church, vacation, travel, all gone until some time in the future. More critically, for many, jobs were lost, support systems dissolved, and there was no way to know when it would end. It's still not really clear, friends. I knew it was there, but I hadn't adequately put a name to it. And this is a paragraph from last year that I share because it still resonates. And since then, we've had the horror and grief and loss surrounding the murder of George Floyd, and the drawing back of the curtain to reveal again to white America the life that we don't often see. Systemic racism isn't new to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That's the reality they live with all the time. The awakening of those of us who are white and the astonishing movement that has grown in the time since his death is stunning. And from Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we have heard the cry of long-held anger, grief that never stops because of the brutality of systemic racism that never stops. Still with us here a year hence. What times we are living through, my friends. I offer to you 3 wise perspectives that Dr. Moss offered in his sermon last year, perspective that helped me in my grief these days. The first thing is to remember that it is always, always okay to mourn. It's okay, even necessary, to make space and time to feel the grief and to give it attention. Denise Levertov gives us some guidance on how to welcome it. The image of that old dog really resonates with me. It's important to give a name and a dish of its own and a collar and a tag, a place that's warm and comforting. A wise mentor has talked about the spiritual practice of welcoming, reminding me that we cannot change what is happening in the world, but we can consciously make some choices about how we respond to what's happening. Making room, making space, making time to mourn. The second is really more of a prescription than a perspective, and that is find someone to commiserate with. To whom do you speak of your grief? Who hears you? Who understands what has been lost? I'm part of a group of colleagues who gather once a month to share about our ministries and our lives. And much of our time over this last year has been spent talking through the complex grief of this time. So much lost in so many ways. So I ask, to whom do you bring your grief? Find a companion who can hear you and who you can hear into a more centered and whole place. The third perspective is to widen the frame of what you're seeing. As Dr. Otis was preaching in his seemingly empty church, eventually the camera began to pan back, pull back, widening the frame. We discovered that, in fact, his wife has been sitting there in one of the pews just outside of the frame of the video. Like the woman whose grief is unending, who is told that to be free, she must make a potion by gathering a mustard seed from every house in the village where grief has not come. Widening our frame means recognizing that grief is universal. None of us remain untouched by loss and by grief. When we pull back and widen the frame, when we give our grief a place, and when we have a community in which we can acknowledge and voice our grief, we are better served. Our grief has a place. So I want to invite you into a time when we can name and share our grief of this last year, even whatever that grief might be. In a few moments, we'll pause and we'll see Nancy begin to drop color into water that is set next to her chalice at home. As you are moved to do so, I invite you to name your grief, type it into the chat, and Tim and I will read them aloud as the drops representing our griefs spread and merge in the water. First, let us pause for just a moment or two of quiet. Let us breathe deeply in and deeply out. And then we'll begin. I invite you to type your griefs. Sylvia's brother, Armando.
Pete Bittner, the loss of faith in humanity due to the right thing.
Pete Bittner.
Seeing and hugging my family.
Grief for the loss of my brother, Caesar.
Kathy Strickland. My planned visits with my family.
Ken Barnett.
Pumpkin.
Loss of our good friend John to cancer.
Loss of ease of community.
Pat Sibley.
I miss playing and singing live music with you on Sunday.
Loss of my younger brother, Ronnie.
Maria Alasan.
The pandemic-induced depression of my kids.
Young people, teens and preteens, loneliness during this time.
The loss of feeling comfortable, safe in public spaces.
Missing my mother, who I lost in November.
John Neji.
Hugging away a friend's pain.
Singing together in church, even when it's off key, maybe especially when it's off key.
Penny Shtick, my beloved sister.
Brenda's struggle to find a job, our desperation to keep our heads above water.
Not being with my mom when she died.
Mm.
my mom.
Friends, as we continue to rest with these, I offer these words of prayer and meditation. I'll share this last one: medical workers who must isolate from their families. Let us come into a time. John McPhee, the griefs do not end. Let us come into a time of prayer, my friends, together. Spirit of love and of life, bless us and these griefs, named and unnamed. Sorrow seems unending as we find our way onward and through these changing and challenging times. Be with us here. Open our hearts to both the sorrow and the care and the love, all swirled into one whole. Help us to welcome it all, that which is bitter, that which cuts deeply, that which seems small, unimportant. We welcome it all with tears, with the love that lives beneath it, owning it, naming it. Be with us here as we widen our view, seeing our companions, those who also walk with grief. And let us always remember the love that underlies each grief. Let us pause now for just a few moments of stillness together. So may it be. Amen. Blessed be. This day, like all other days, let us part company, knowing what it is that we must do to live in this world. To practice kindness always, to be ready to learn from each moment, to offer the world our gifts of love and attention. This day, like all other days, let us part company, knowing what we carry with us always, the possibility of joy, the satisfaction of growth and new learning, the spirit of life ever abiding, and that we have our place in the interconnected web of all existence, and we are never alone. My friends, go in peace and in love.
Please join me with the words that can be found in the chat as we extinguish this chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And then please join us as we sing out our closing song with Asher. Words can be found in the chat.
I receive, to you I give, together we share, and of this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and of this we live. Can I stop it? Yep. You didn't stop it.